if all you care about is value proposition or the best bang for your buck in terms of a 75%, it'd probably be wise to look elsewhere. The group buy ends on the 9th of February and it fulfills in Q3 of 2025. The AK75 is a collaboration between Artkey, which are artisan makers, AKB or Alchemist Keyboard James, and McLovin, who designed the PCB. The base price is $340 to $360, and that does not include the additional resin weight, which is an extra $170. The assembly can be frustrating due to the JST cable, but hopefully that will be addressed. This is a first for me. I've seen or held keyboards with nice back or weight designs, specifically the Migra TKL recently, but I've never had the opportunity to check out a board that was a collaboration with an artisan maker, in this case, Artkey Universe. Yes, there was the GAF 910, which was a collaboration with GAF and TGR, and there have been other collaboration boards with other artisan makers, but this is the first time that I've experienced it myself. James, from Alchemist Keyboards, helped Artkey design the board, and McLovin, another well-known designer, designed the PCB. So you have a real power throuple with 3 well-known names in the keyboard and artisan community. But do I think the keyboard lives up to its designers' reputations? Let's find out together. As always, let's start with a disclaimer section of the video. This is a prototype unit, so what I cover may not be exactly what the production units will be like, whether it's the board themselves or the things that come with the production units, so keep that in mind. Me, and others like me, have given our thoughts about the prototype units as a whole, and I do believe that there will be some changes, mostly quality of life changes, but I'll get to that during the build process of this video and the cons part of this video. Please know that the very nature of prototype units, whether it be keyboards, keycaps, switches, or any other aspect of our hobby, is to improve on the product in order for the eventual production run products to be better, and that scuffs or issues on proto units aren't necessarily indicative of what we'll see for the production units. Also, like with every single video that I make or every article that I write, do know that these are just my opinions and my preferences. If you disagree with me, that's absolutely fine. We don't have to be on the same page, and that's what makes this hobby so great. We all have specific things that we like and reasons why we like them. Don't feel like you have to like or want a board based on someone else's thoughts or opinions. Please do your own research to come up with your own conclusions and never feel like you're missing out on anything. I have 3 reasons why I enjoy making review videos. The first is to hopefully be of use to the designer, whether it be things I liked, things I didn't like. I love helping designers. I'm not saying that I tell them how to design, I simply give my opinions, which hopefully will be helpful for them, either for the board that they created or future boards. The second reason is to give you, the viewer, information that will hopefully help you make a smart purchasing decision, or even to not buy something. Please do not feel like you have to impulse buy, and please be financially responsible with purchases in our hobby. It's never worth going into debt, making an irrational purchasing decision, or buying something for the sake of buying. At the end of the day, this is a luxury hobby. We don't need keyboards, and in this day and age, deciding to save your money by passing up on a purchase is an extremely smart decision. Consider my opinions and thoughts, and also watch other videos, or read what other people have said about these products in order to decide if a purchase is worth it or not. Someone may cover something that I may not have covered, or they may have more experience talking about something than me, which is why it's important to receive information from many sources instead of just going off of one person's thoughts. For example, I know next to nothing about resin or artisans, because I consider myself a fledgling artisanite. Artisaner? Artisan enjoyer? Whatever it's called. I respect and love the artisans that I have, but if you want to learn about Artkey or the history of their designs, I'm not your guy. I'd consider reaching out to Diego, aka Lightning XI, for those questions or comments, since he's the artisan guru. And the third reason is because I simply love making keyboard content. I don't do this for the views or to get paid. Like all of you, I love our hobby, and I'm so blessed to be able to talk and write about keyboard-related items in my spare time. I never take payment or ask for any sort of recognition or kickback from anything that I make. I make it clear that I never accept things for free, and I never will, and I do everything myself. Recording, editing, writing. It's all a one-man show, and I love doing it. So never worry about whether Canon Keys or any other vendor or manufacturer sent me something to keep for free, paid me off to say specific things, or asked to see my content to edit it before it releases. No one owns me. I don't accept money, and I do this because of the 3 reasons that I mentioned earlier. Canon Keys sent me this board to review, not to keep, and once I'm done, I'll be shipping it back to them in Rhode Island. They, as well as Artkey and Alchemist Keyboard James, didn't give me a script of what to say or have any control over what I say. I am truly appreciative of the opportunities that I've been given to review things, however. Whether it's a designer or a vendor that asks me to review things, or things that I buy myself and make content on without the designer asking me to. I'm truly blessed. So thank you to all the designers, past, present, and future, that have allowed me a chance to cover your products. And especially thank you to Martin from Canon Keys. I'm grateful for every opportunity that I get to cover these things that you send me, and I never take these things for granted. And especially thank you, the viewers. Those of you that have been there since the beginning, from my awful sound test videos years ago, and those that have just recently found my channel, I'm truly appreciative and grateful for all of you. You all are the reason why I enjoy doing this and why I think our keyboard community is special. So thank you. And remember, the most important thing when it comes to this hobby, besides being respectful and being financially healthy, of course, is whether you enjoy your purchase. Who cares what other people think? If you're able to afford it without hurting yourself financially, emotionally, or in any other way, and you enjoy the board, whether it's the looks, sound, or feel, and be it a guess or based on the research that you've done, hey, that's perfect. You are the one that enjoys your board, not anyone else. So don't care what others think as long as you enjoy your purchase and do so responsibly. You love the way the AK75 looks? You have the money to buy it? Who cares if someone else thinks that it doesn't look good? Only you know your preferences and what you consider to be a worthy purchase. I think we can sometimes fall into the trap of letting others decide whether you should like something or not. So please remember that at the end of the day, if you're happy, and as long as you're financially responsible, that's all that matters. For the specs of this keyboard, please check the Geek Hack link and the Canon Keys link in the video description below to look at the specs at your own pace. But of course, I will also go over them right now as well. The group buy for this board started on January 13th and ends on February 9th, roughly a week from when this video releases. Please know that I will also be quoting Canon Keys pricing since I'm in the US, and Canon Keys is the vendor that sent me this board to review. So if you buy the board from another vendor, the prices may be a tad different. For the US, it's Canon Keys as the vendor. For Vietnam, it's Mech Key Store. For the EU, it's KeyGem. For China, it's D Frontier. Singapore has Ilum KB. And the UK has the legend J, aka Prototypist. The estimated fulfillment date is Q3 of 2025. The cheapest variants of the board are the anodized colors and solderable PCB options, with the yellow E-coat option being $10 more, and the hot swap option also being $10 more. So the cheapest configuration would be a solderable anodized color, which would be $340, and $360 for a yellow E-coat hot swap configuration. The AK75 was designed by Artkey Universe, a team of 4 well-known Vietnamese artisan makers. I'll also include a link to their sculpt catalog in the description portion of this video. And they're well known for their corgi-themed keycaps, whose name is Sirius. I don't have any of their sculpts, but they definitely are pretty cute. For the AK75, it took 3 years for this idea to come to life. Artkey reached out to our beloved James from Alchemist Keyboards, one of the most based and kindest designers in our hobby, at least in my opinion, to bring their concept of the AK75 to life. Artkey also had help from McLovin to design the PCB, and we all know McLovin's design history from PCBs to keyboards. I've never interacted with him personally, but I do know that they helped with the GAF and TGR 910's PCB, as well as many other PCBs. The default configuration for the AK75 is an 8-degree typing angle, 60-63 aluminum top case, bottom case, and back weight, a 50-52 aluminum plate, which is the only default plate offering, but you can also buy plates in PC, carbon fiber, and FR4 as add-ons. The PCBs are QMK and VIA compatible. It has a 19mm front height, and it's approximately 1.9 kilos fully built with the default alu plate and alu weight. It's adhesive pour-on gasket mounted, similar to the Kohaku and many other adhesive gasket mounted boards. You either have the choice of hot swap or solderable PCBs, both having Perky RGB and an LED light bar on the top left of the board. And while these prototype hot swap PCBs don't have step caps lock, according to CannonKey's website, it appears as though the production units will have it. And, as per usual, you get more layout options if you go the soldered PCB route. For the hot swap option, you have to use ANSI enter, full backspace, full left shift, 6.25U spacebar bottom row with 1.25U mods. And again, while the prototype PCB didn't have the option, the production run hot swap PCBs will have step cap support. For the solderable option, you have split left shift, ISO enter, split backspace, 7U spacebar with a 1.5U, 1U, 1.5U left side bottom, and a 1.5U right side bottom. The PCB requires a daughter board and JST cable, which come with the kit of course. You can buy spare solderable and hot swap PCBs as well as the daughter board and JST cable as extras, and do know that this daughter board is not a universal design. You also get a choice of either using an F13 key or an anodized aluminum logo badge for the top right of the keyboard. It has rounded edges, and both the logo badge and default aluminum weight have Artkey's fingerprint logo design. You can buy extra metal logo badges, and there is a raw brass sandblasted option for $25, and the same colors as the cases for the other metal logo options. The board uses AKB feet, so if you need to replace a foot or two, like what I had to do with my unit that was missing an adhesive foot, if you have AKB feet laying around, it'll be compatible. Do note that you don't put the adhesive feet on the optional resin weight, and that weight itself will have a part that's a bit raised. It's semi-screwless, which is absolutely understandable when you consider that the biggest selling point of this board is the nice bottom, at least when it comes to the optional resin weight. And my main gripes are more so the way that the JST cable channel was implemented than anything else, but I'll get into that later. You can choose between a monochrome gray colorway, a red royal wine color, navy blue, a rose gold, which is what my unit was, and an E-coat yellow colorway. The gray, red, blue, and rose gold are anodized, and the yellow is an E-coat. You can buy custom feet, gaskets, and a foam kit as well, but my sound tests were all foamless and we were not sent the foam kit. The foam kit includes your standard bottom case foam, mid-piece foam, and PE foam sheet that sits on top of the PCBs as most PE foam sheets do. However, the huge selling point and the aspect of the board that I really loved the look of was the optional/additional $170 resin weight and additional $30 resin batch. Both are limited in quantity because they're handcrafted, and if you buy both, you'll add on $200 to that initial price, so the board can end up being $560 if you choose the most expensive options, which are E-coat yellow, a hot swap PCB, a resin weight, and a resin badge. There are 5 resin weights and 5 resin badge designs available, with a 6th weight and badge design being available after the AK75 group by ends via a raffle method, and only if you bought a keyboard. That 6th weight and badge design will be very limited. I'd recommend checking out Artkey's Discord for details on that if you're interested, and I'll also include their Discord link in the video description. I think they'll be doing the raffle for that 6th design on February 10th, according to the AK75 listing on Artkey's website. They also seem to be doing a raffle for an actual artisan keycap as well on February 12th for those that bought the board. Also, please read the QC information regarding the resin weights and badges, and note that we all got prototype versions of the resin weight and badges. The final production run versions will be better. Again, I'll list the specs off of CannonKey's website for the production units, but I'll also go over the things that I got of the prototype units. Off of CannonKey's website, you'll get the top case, you'll get what they call the middle case, but it's basically the bottom case, and then the anodized, not the resin weight itself, which acts as part of the bottom case. You get an aluminum plate by default, the LED light bar diffuser piece made of PC that you can screw into the top case so you don't blind yourself with RGB, your choice of hot swap or solderable PCB, the USB-C daughter board and JST cable, gaskets, AKB feet, screws, and whatever you need to assemble the board, the usual CannonKey's white microfiber cloth, which I love and have many of, and a carrying case. For the prototype units, I got basically everything that I stated above, although I'm not 100% sure if the case design will carry over or if it's just a normal Canon keys carrying case. I did watch Diego and Mech Merlin build this during their build streams, but I totally forgot how they ended up figuring out the JST situation. So when it came time for me to build the board, I was essentially building it for the first time. Maybe something they did seeped into my subconsciousness, but I didn't go, oh, Diego did this, so I need to do this, or anything along those lines. Also, I'm pretty sure that I assembled the board the way it was supposed to be assembled, but if you figure out a different way and it works for you, that's totally fine as well. I also fully disassembled the board, and the board will probably come somewhat assembled when it arrives at your doorstep. However, I figured that the easiest way to go through each step to assemble the board was to disassemble it completely. The 6 bottom case screws use an H1.5 hex bit, and the 6 weight screws require an H1.3 hex bit. The 2 daughterboard screws also use the H1.5 hex bit as well. Anyways, first and foremost, like with any other build, you QC your board. See if there are any issues or things that are not up to spec when it comes to the QC disclaimer, and then act accordingly. While it doesn't happen often, if you don't catch issues unless you've built the board, especially if you're working with a solderable PCB, chances are you'll be kind of SOL. So after QCing your board, install your stabs after you lube and tune them, and your switches into your PCB. If it's hot swap like the PCBs that we were sent, make sure that your PCB is sitting flat on whatever surface you're using to build the board, or support the hot swap socket of whichever switch you're installing with one hand, while you insert the switch with your other to avoid popping out a hot swap socket. Once you've successfully installed your stabs and switches, I would recommend taking the daughter board and connecting the JST cable between the PCB and that daughter board, but make sure that the pins of the JST connector on the daughter board and PCB are straight, because if they aren't and you mash the cable in there, you may bend them, so make sure that they're straight. Then, plug in a USB-C cable into that USB-C port on the daughter board, and check that each switch registers correctly. You can use a keyboard tester or a VIA, for example. If you have a solderable board, use tweezers instead of installing your switches, and test the PCB by inserting the tweezers into where you normally insert your switch metal connectors in, and test the PCB that way. Next, and this is very important, do not put your keycaps on your switches. You're going to need access to the 6 holes that go through the plate and PCB in order to screw in the back weight. If my unit hadn't already been assembled in terms of pour-on gaskets, I'd put the adhesive pour-on gaskets in their respective channels on both the top and bottom case parts, and also screw in either the optional logo badge where your F13 key would be. It was already pre-installed for me, so I just left it. Or make sure that you don't have a badge installed there if you want access to the F13 key. This is also the time where you'd screw in that LED diffuser on the top case. But again, it was already installed for me when I got the unit, so I just left it be. So, you've QC'd your board, you've tested your PCB, you've installed your switches, or soldered them in, you installed your stabs and your switches, or soldered in your switches, you have your plate installed, you've attached the adhesive pour-on gaskets, you've installed the LED diffuser, and now you're ready for the next step. Take your daughter board and JST cable, plug in the cable into the daughter board if you haven't already, again, making sure you're orienting the connectors the right way and that the pins are straight, and snake it through the bottom case. Next, connect the JST cable into the PCB, and now this is where the fun begins. Place your internals, plate, switch, stabs, PCB, into the bottom case so that the plate tabs match up to where you attach the pour-on gaskets. Then, place your top case on top. Screw in your top case with the 6 H1.5 hex bit screws. I can't remember why I only screwed 3 in, but this is where you screw all 6 in. Now take a deep breath and be patient. The next step is where you may encounter issues. So, you have your weight, and what you're going to want to do is screw in the daughter board with the 2 screws, which also require that H1.5 hex bit, but do this carefully so you don't put too much unnecessary strain on the JST cable. You think you might want to use a longer JST cable to make this easier, but don't. Okay, this is where things can get hairy. Carefully place the top case on the top of the weight, ensuring that the JST cable is as flat as possible in its channel in the weight. This is the hardest part of the build because if that JST cable is not flat, you'll have a gap between the weight and the top case. Do not continue until you have no gap. Once you manage to have no gap, this is where you screw in the weight into the bottom case through those 6 holes that would have been hidden if you had placed your keycaps on top of your switches. Do note that these are not magnetic and may fall into the holes if you aren't careful. Maybe the production units will have all magnetic screws since the rest of the case screws and daughter bar screws were, just not these ones. But these prototype units did not. Now pat yourself on the back, stand up and stretch, and just feel the relief wash over you since all you have to do now is put on your keycaps. Great job, and I'm proud of you. With aesthetics, it's very subjective, just like with a lot of things in our hobby. And again, feel free to disagree with me. That's totally fine. We like what we like, and who am I to judge you if you don't like the same things I like? The first thing that stood out to me were the rounded corners, then the nice 2-color top case, and finally the back weight. The default black aluminum one reminded me of a topographical map, although I know it's meant to be Artkey's fingerprint logo, just expanded. And the way that the weight is part of the back case is pretty cool in my opinion. But like I talked about in the build process, that may not be everyone's cup of tea due to how the screws were being hidden for the weight portion. But man, the huge selling point, at least in my opinion, is the optional $170 resin weight. Since I have the rose gold colorway, I believe the resin weight for that colorway is called the rose tinted sky, and the resin weight for that is the turquoise one. For me, and this is again purely my opinion, if I wanted to buy the board, I would definitely shell out the additional $170 for that resin weight. There's nothing wrong with the base unit, but the resin weight is so captivating and beautiful in my opinion that I'd want to buy one. If you're happy with the looks of the base unit, that's absolutely fine. Again, I'm just telling you what my preferences are and what I like, and it's up to you to decide what you like or what your preferences are. As someone that values aesthetics over sound or feel when it comes to the keyboard triangle, this board absolutely takes the cake in the aesthetics category, as long as I take into consideration that additional/optional resin weight. Also, I wish I had GMK Olivia to put on this, but I didn't. So I used GMK Evil Dolch from Geonworks and DCS Sleeper in most of my pictures. You know, a lot of people ask why I make super long sound test videos, especially if we all know that sound tests aren't necessarily 100% accurate. Honestly, it's a mixture of 3 things. The first is that for a lot of the boards or review items that I get, there's sort of a time crunch aspect to them. Depending on when I get sent the board, when it arrives, and when the group buy ends, or when the IC for a potential public run or group buy starts, it may be a week until that happens, like in this scenario. Or, in very rare occasions, it may be a month or 2 out. Either way, not only do I use the boards and keycap sets that I'm sent to review during my normal job during the day, which is between 50 to 60 hours a week, but also because I'm straight up typing for 3 hours, 6 hours, or 10 hours in these sound tests, it gives me enough information to come up with a conclusion before the group buy ends and before it's too late to upload these review videos. Long-term reviews aren't always possible, especially if it's for things that haven't been out for a long time or whose group buys are slated to end soon. So long sound tests help me sort of test drive the board for a good 100 hours or so of actual typing. The second reason why I make long sound test videos is that I want to be somewhat useful. If I have the capability, whether it be with various switches or various microphones, to make a sound test compilation, even though we all know the pros and cons of sound tests, I'd be doing a disservice to you, the keyboard community, and the designers who have given me the opportunity to test drive their board or keycap set if I don't make long sound tests. And the third, I kind of like being over the top or trying to bring something new to the table. My favorite gaming channel, Mortismal Gaming, is of a guy that 100%s every single game he does reviews on. That may seem insane, right? But his thought process was, what better way to give useful information during his reviews than 100%ing a game, including all achievements? It sets him apart from other reviewers, and while it doesn't automatically make his reviews better than the others, you gotta appreciate the lengths he's willing to go, and he loves doing it. Of course, my sound test videos aren't inherently better than anyone else's, but I'll be damned if I don't put forth effort when it comes to videos. I'm not going to half-ass something if I can help it, and while I may not have the current capability or skill to make awesome B-roll content or edit a video with a bunch of transitions or cool shots here and there, I can still put forth effort. Plus, according to myself and many other people that have visited me, they've agreed that the sound test footage that includes my CM4 small diaphragm condenser mics in that AB configuration capture how my boards sound exactly in real life. But without getting too much into sound tests, you can check my video about them on my channel. For the AK75, I'll do the same as I've done with the Migra TKL and K3 reviews, which is to separate the actual review video from those sound tests. If you want to listen to the sound tests, please check the links of the 2 3-hour-long sound test videos of this board down in the video description. And obviously you don't have to listen to all 3 hours worth of footage. In my opinion, with the default aluminum plate and default aluminum weight, the board tends to lean towards the lower pitched and deeper sounding side of things. So I enjoyed the more high pitched and louder switches such as the Geon and Haimu white tactiles and the Dankeeb's cookies and cream tactiles, which I think are manufactured by KTT, at least that's what I remembered that I read in Theremin Goat's article of them. The usual Cherry MX linears weren't bad by any means, but since I felt like I got a deeper sound signature in all the tests that I tried, I enjoyed pairing things like DCS keycaps, which are thinner than the other keycaps, and louder, high-pitched switches. Obviously, my typing setup and atmosphere is not the same as yours, and please don't hate me if you don't experience the same thing, but I can only talk about what I experienced with my setup, and that I've used that setup for many years, which is a solid wooden desk, one 3mm thick desk mat, and a room that doesn't have foam panels or any sort of official sound treatment, but not an entirely bare room either. And as always, take sound tests with a grain of salt, since you'll never truly know what a board sounds like until you're typing on it in your own environment with your own setup. But you can at least make comparative assumptions with my sound tests. For example, XMI is going to sound deeper than GMK, maybe, because you can listen to a GMK and XMI sound test and you can make that comparison. Or the same thing with KTT Roses and Cherry Nixies. You can listen to how one sounds with one microphone and how the other sounds like with that same microphone and the same combination of switches and keycaps and so on. And you can make assumptions of which sound higher pitched, which sound deeper, and so on. And also know that while I did use 4 keycaps, GMK, DCS, CRP Round 6, and XMI, as well as 8 different switches, which were the Geon Black Linears, which are similar to Zaku's, KTT Roses, the new Cherry Nixies, Cherry Hyperglide Reds, Geon and Haimu White Tactiles, Dankeeb's Cookies and Cream Tactiles, Cherry MX2A Purples, and Cherry Hyperglide Browns. There are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of different keycap and switch combinations out there. So just because a board may sound good or bad with the configurations that I tried, won't mean that it's going to sound good or bad with the configurations that you try. So just enjoy sound tests for what they are, which is entertainment value with a hint of what a board may sound like, and know that in my opinion, the default aluminum plate and aluminum weight gives the board a lower pitched sound with the switches and keycaps that I tried. Not the absolute best sounding board that I've ever tried, but that's not necessarily a fair comparison or fair to the AK75, since different layouts, plates, and so on affect sound. But if you're interested in a great sounding board, more than aesthetics or feel, and you do enjoy a lower pitched or deeper sound signature, you could do way worse than the AK75. And in terms of the sound difference between the resin weight and the aluminum weight, I actually didn't genuinely try it due to not having the correct screws to fully screw in the weight to the back part of the board, as well as me not wanting to damage the artisan weight more than it already was. It was a bit scuffed, but I'll touch upon that later. However, in my few seconds of typing, with that resin weight not being fully screwed in, it did seem to raise the pitch of the board a tad bit more than the aluminum default weight. It wasn't extremely noticeable, and again, I did not properly or fully test it, but I did notice a slight difference. While the gaskets do allow the typing experience to be a tad bit more flexible than usual, with the default aluminum plate, I wouldn't classify this as a very soft typing feel. It's not very harsh or stiff at all, but you have to press somewhat hard in order to have a noticeable soft typing feel. Now, it's not exhausting by any means. I mean, I put 100 hours into testing this board, typing nonstop for days on end, and my fingers weren't tired, but don't expect a super soft typing experience either with the default aluminum plate. Maybe if you select the PC plate, that might change. Who knows? We only had access to the aluminum plate, so I can't necessarily speak on what you'd experience with the PC plate, but obviously, polycarbonate is softer than aluminum, so I'd venture to guess that the typing feel would be a bit softer with the PC plate. Would you be able to notice the difference? Yeah, probably, but I'm just guessing here since again, I don't have first-hand experience with the PC versus aluminum plate for the AK75. If you're someone who gets tired from typing, you're not going to have an issue with the AK75, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a noticeably soft typing experience. The gaskets were implemented correctly in order for space and the internals to flex, but it's not something that I'd really notice besides pressing super hard during the mod spam portions of my typing tests. $340 or $360 for the non-resin weight and badge variants of the AK75? Just judging the board based on complexity, design choices, materials used, the different designers working on the board, and so on, I think it's a fair price. However, and again, this is my opinion, and you're absolutely okay to disagree, the big selling point and the reason why this board really stood out to me was the optional resin weight. It looks amazing, but you do need to tack on an additional $170 for it. And when you consider how much resin or sculpts from Artkey Universe cost, and then factor in the sheer size of this weight, the fact that there are multiple components to each weight, and the look/3D effect of the weight, the painting, casting, assembling, QCing layers, everything that goes into making artisan keycaps, but with this giant weight, I do understand why it costs $170. And the designs are super cool as well. But remember, just because something may be a great value or a purchase doesn't mean that it's affordable to everyone. But that's fine as well. For example, just pretend that $340 for a rose gold anodized solderable PCB option for the AK75 and buying that resin weight, which is $170, brings your total to $510. Now pretend that there was no sort of markup and that $510 was the pure machining and materials cost to make the board in the artisan weight. That's still half a grand. That's $1,000. And this is where you gotta be smart and remember that we're in the luxury hobby. No one needs to spend $1,000 on a keyboard, even if it's a good value. If you can, and you want to without hurting yourself financially, that's great. But if you can't, don't feel like it's a need or that you have to buy. Just because something is a great value doesn't mean that it's necessarily cheap. Value and cheap sometimes go hand in hand, but not always. And I think we sometimes tend to forget that. In my personal opinion, I love the look of the board with the optional $170 resin weight option. But I also understand that not everyone can afford to spend an extra $170 on top of the base price. I think the pricing is reasonable, but it's not for everyone. And again, that's totally fine. I'm not saying that everyone that enjoys resin or artisans as well shell out a lot of money for their artisans, but generally speaking, since artisans do cost as much as a keycap set, if not more sometimes, those that are in the artisan community may be better equipped at understanding or accepting the cost of the resin weight option purely because they have experience with that part of the hobby. Not every artisan is nearly $200, but some are, and many exceed that price. I don't think that this is priced higher than it should be. For example, this is not a situation where it's a one-piece 60% gummy O-ring pure aluminum case and it costs $600 or $700. And especially because this board has an artisan aspect to it, which may reach a wider audience than those that aren't interested in artisans, I think it's a fair price. But remember, please be financially responsible and don't have FOMO. I'm not a keyboard designer, have never run a group buy, or sold anything to the community, and these opinions are just my own. Just know that again, we all see things differently and we have different opinions on things. Some people may not think that these are cons, while others may agree with me. First of all, my prototype unit and other prototype units have interior and exterior blemishes, scuffs, and imperfections. Is it a combination of many people handling the boards, shipping, and so on? Sure, I think so. I don't think that one person scuffed the board. All I know is that I was the last person to have received this rose gold unit, and my unit had blemishes, nicks, and scratches. My unit was also missing an adhesive foot, and I couldn't find it, so it may have gotten jostled around by the shipping courier. But like I said, they use AKB feet, so as long as you have spares from some other board, for example the QFRL in my case, it'll be fine. The 6 case screws are magnetic, but the 6 internal screws that screw the bottom case and the weight are not. Like Mech Merlin experienced during his build stream, it may result in those screws falling into the board, and you may possibly have a hard time installing the weight. The resin weight itself was also scratched and scuffed. But again, the group buy units will be different. I encourage everyone to read the QC information regarding the resin, and it states that the final units will have a protective layer, which these prototype units do not, and that's going to definitely help with scratch protection. And while the units will hopefully be flawless, make sure you know what things are considered acceptable and which aren't by reading the QC disclaimer. However, while those issues are worth mentioning, the production/group buy units and weights won't have those issues. The word prototype itself means that it's an early version of something, so it's not going to be flawless or pristine as compared to production units. So I get it, and I'm not too worried as long as the production units are QC'd correctly. So you can chalk up those blemishes as simply the name of the game when it comes to protos, shipping things around the world, and many people handling the boards. However, the biggest actual con, the one that many content creators have talked about and that both Canon Keys and Artkey have been made aware of, and hopefully Artkey will be able to implement or fix, was just how difficult it was to make sure that the JST cable was seated correctly when assembling everything together. The way that the JST channel and the rest of the board was designed results in you having a hell of a time trying to assemble everything when you got to that point. Even though I managed to do it without much trouble, it's absolutely something that hopefully can be addressed. Now, I don't know if that's feasible because it might not meet the design aesthetics of Artkey or what they envisioned. And look, a bigger picture view, right? It's a keyboard, right? In the grand scheme of things, there are more important things to worry about, and there are bigger issues in the world, or even your own life. It's not a big deal when you put the JST cable issues besides those issues in life. And I'm not saying, oh no, we little keyboard streamer or content creator thinks it's hard to assemble the board. I'm saying that when it comes to assembling a keyboard, compared to all other keyboards that I've assembled, you would think that it would be relatively straightforward with the AK75, right? 6 screws to screw in the weight to the back case, 6 screws to screw the top and bottom case together. But the way that you have to struggle to make sure that the JST cable is sitting flush in this channel before you can screw everything together was quite the experience, and in my opinion, a big con when it came to this keyboard. Yes, it's designed to be screwless or semi-screwless in order for the default weight and resin weight to be shown off and you don't see screws, and that idea is fine. But the JST cable and that channel is going to be a serious issue in terms of build experience when it comes to this board, and build experience is a large factor in many people's purchasing decisions. How can this be fixed? Well, other content creators have already put forward their suggestions, and for what I've been told, Artkey is aware and we'll see what they can do. But just be warned, if that aspect of the board isn't tweaked at all, I can see many people having a frustrating build experience. Absolute worst case scenario, nothing changes. All you have to do is just stay calm, don't feel like you have to get the assembly perfect right away, and take things slow. Reference my build guide portion of the video and other people's builds as well, and do know that I believe in you. It definitely was somewhat of a challenge, but hey, you faced more difficult challenges in your life. Also, I'd love for there to be at least 1 or 2 extra feet or 1 or 2 extra screws for each of the screws in case the buyer loses one or needs a spare. I know that you can buy extras, but I always like it when you get a few extras when it comes to feet or screws with the base price or with the included kit. When you look at the AK75 as a whole, taking into consideration the price, what you get, what options there are, the build experience, aesthetics, sound, feel, and story behind Artkey Universe, Alchemist Keyboard James, and McLovin, I think this is a unique board when you factor in the option to buy the artisan weight. Without the artisan weight, the board does look nice, but for me, if I were to buy the board, I want that artisan weight. Keep in mind, however, that it technically won't be seen when you're using it since it's on the back. And maybe for some of you, it's more of a display board or a showcase board than a daily driver, especially if you want to be careful with the resin weight. So I understand if your thought process is, I love the looks of it, but I actually want to use my board instead of just display it, and I'm scared that I might scratch or scuff my resin weight. Well, each of us decides what's a worthwhile purchase and what our preferences are, and we each have different likes and dislikes, so just remember that it's okay to not want to buy this board, and it's also okay if you do buy this board, as long as you do so responsibly and stay financially healthy. Sound is also subjective. With the combinations that I tried, the board tends to give off a more lower pitched and a bit more muted sound signature with the combinations. The one aspect of the board, however, that I think will apply to everyone, regardless of your preferences, is the fact that it can be somewhat frustrating to keep that JST cable flat and not squish it at the same time while assembling the board correctly. Again, we'll see what design changes, if any, will be made to address this. But it's the only actual con I have when it comes to the board. And again, we all eventually did figure it out. It just took more effort than expected. Anyways, my recommendation for this board is that if you love the aesthetics of the board, especially the resin weight, even though it's $170 on top of the base price, you're going to be happy. If you don't care about the resin weight or don't want to pay $170 on top of the base price, but you still like the aesthetics of the normal kit, then the base price is fine as well. But don't feel like you have to compromise your enjoyment. If you know that you wouldn't like the board without the optional resin weight, but you can't afford it, then don't buy it. And if all you care about is a value-driven 75% keyboard, this is not the board for you. There are many boards that focus on the value aspect and the best bang for your buck, so consider looking elsewhere if you want a 75% board along those lines. For me, I will not be buying this board, but I love the way it looks with the optional resin weight. But that's just because I don't buy every single board that I love, because one, I'm not a millionaire, and two, my wife would kill me. You can't buy everything you like, so you have to make decisions regarding what to buy and what not to buy. That's just life. In closing, however, I believe that the Artkey Universe team, Alchemist Keyboard James, and McLovin did a fantastic job with designing this board. It has one of the most beautiful weights that I've ever seen on any board, and it being made out of resin is super unique. As long as that JST cable situation is addressed, I really don't see anyone having issues with this board if they buy it. Thanks for watching. I love you all, and see you next time.